Hello everyone, welcome to F1 Explains, the official Formula One podcast that exists to answer your questions about the greatest sport in the world. My name is Christian Hugill, and this is how it works. You email us your questions to f1explains@f1.com, and people like me run around the paddock finding the best people to answer them. And this week's person answering those questions is a very special guest. He's the big boss, the boss of the whole sport, CEO and president of Formula One, Stefano Domenicali. And we get to talk to him about all sorts of things: the sport's relationship with the USA, the cost cap, Formula One's trip around the world, and where we might be going next. We cover so many topics with Stefano, and he's a very busy man, as you can imagine, on race weekends. So we're grateful that he spent so much time with us. So we'd better get on with it then. This is F1 Explains with the President and CEO of Formula One, Mr. Stefano Domenicali. Stefano Domenicali, a very warm welcome to F1 Explains. This is a real treat for us having you here. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks to all our viewers and all our fans, because, as I said, we have the opportunity to talk with them in a different way.
Absolutely. And we said on the podcast feed that you were going to come on a few weeks ago. Our inbox nearly caught fire. We had a lot of questions for you, Stefano, to f1explains@f1.com about all different sorts of topics. We're doing a sort of Ask the Boss. Are you ready and happy to answer our listeners' questions, our listeners from all over the world?
Absolutely, yes.
I'm glad about that. It would seem a shame while you're here if we didn't. So let's crack straight on. And Stefano, you are obviously the president and CEO of Formula One. What a job title. Explain to our listeners, what does that mean? What exactly does being the CEO of Formula One involve?
Well, actually, it's a responsibility of making sure that all the team and all the job that we have to take under control is done properly in a sort of coordinated act, because we are like a dancers, and an orchestras. We are going around the world. We have to deal with our prima donna, the drivers and the teams, but we have our partners that has to be respected, our broadcasters to be respected. We are working together with our promoters, and we have to deal with a sort of political level on which we need to be very good on. So it's a 365 days job, 24 hours connected. It's a great opportunity. It's a great blessing in a way, even if sometimes you believe, oh my God, we are traveling is heavy. I said heavy is something else, not what we're doing. As I said, we have the privilege of going around the world, knowing a lot of cultures, meeting a lot of people, and try to make sure that this business is growing, attracting new fans, attracting new people who loves who we are.
I didn't think in your first answer, Stefano, you describe part of the sport as being like dancers, but I'm very glad you have. I think that's a wonderful analogy. And obviously, Formula One is very different to the FIA. It's something that we speak about a lot on F1 Explains. There's a difference between the sport and the sport's governing body. Where does that come into your role? What is the sort of difference for you between F1 and the FIA? How does that impact you?
Well, first of all, FIA and FOM has been working together since a long time.
Formula One management there.
Absolutely, yeah. And, we are working together because in that respect, we are two different entities that has to take care of different subjects. FIA is the responsible for being the regulator, responsible for safety, on the homologation, on licensing, on managing the sport, from the sport and technical and financial side. We have the duty of making sure that we can commercialize and be the promoter of all the championship in the best way that we can. So it's pretty clear that we both together are shaping the future of our sport.
And we often see you on the TV at the races. You always, to my mind, look incredibly busy. You're almost always talking to someone. We've had lots of emails from our listeners asking what you're doing on a race weekend. What does the boss do on a sort of Friday, Saturday, Sunday when you're at a racetrack?
Well, at the racetrack, there are two main things to follow. First of all, the majority of the things that we have to be involved at the race is done before. Matter of organizing the job at all level. And when you're here, you just follow the meetings with the teams, with the partners, with the promoters, with the guests, with all the politicians that are coming. So it's more a sort of a place where we make sure that the things are done properly, but mainly we meet the people to create the atmosphere and to make sure that things are rolling in the right way. So it's the place where everyone is here. So as you can imagine, there's so many people to meet that the agenda is really fully booked. But it's in a way very encouraging to see that everyone wants to come, and it's the place to be now, Formula One. So it's a great privilege to have the chance and the time for everyone who's coming to meet and discuss about, sport, about the business, about how we can grow and what we can improve. And there are a lot of people that are curious to know exactly what our fan was to understand. That's why they should come and listen not only to my voice, but meet our people. And the beauty of this job is really we have so many different aspects that are interesting, that is just fascinating.
When I was at school, I was the only Formula One fan in my school. I grew up in the 90s and 2000s. You might be pleased to know I had a Ferrari backpack. You'd have been working at Ferrari at the time. And I remember having to explain to people what the backpack was. But as you say, now there will be listeners listening to this at school. There's no way they'll be the only Formula One fans at their school. You just said there that everybody wants to be involved in the sport. It must be so thrilling to be in charge of the sport in such an exciting time.
Well, for sure it's a great joy. But I always take the other angle of being a great responsibility, because we have to shape together with your team, the future of the sport is something big. And what we have to do today is to make sure the foundation of our organization are solid enough to cope with this growth and to cope with the changes, to cope with the different fans that are now attracted by our sport. Of course, there is a huge respect for our traditional fans, with whom we are able to connect in a way that is very clear. But now the big thing that we have to do is to make sure that the new fans that are approaching us needs to be listened, needs to be attracted by a different way of narrative and a different way of talking with them. So that's the beauty of the sport, having people understanding that now the picture is much bigger and we need to think even bigger. That's really what is fascinating, and that's what is really great, in my opinion, to hear that the younger generation, like you, Christian, are attracted by our sport.
We will talk a little bit more about all that side of things a bit later on. Before we move on, though, I just want to talk a bit more about you, Stefano, because as you just said there, maybe some of the newer fans of the sport might not know about your background. You worked at Ferrari in the 1990s. You became team principal. You were there when there was a period of huge success, winning scores of drivers and constructors world titles. Now you find yourself running the sport as opposed to running the team. How different are those two roles? I wonder what the different challenges are.
Well, it's in the same environment, but definitely different kind of things to follow. Even if the experience that I had for 23 years in Ferrari, and I have to say, even later when I joined Audi Group and then I was CEO of Lamborghini for 5 years, was very important, because in this role, it's a different kind of situation where you have to manage, business. It is not only sport. So it's a different point of view. It's a different adrenaline, if you want. And it is, in a way, something that is complementary to what I was doing before. It's just a different angle of perspective. But because I know what is the other angle, is much easier to use that experience in the right way, to make sure that our credibility, my personal credibility, the credibility of the sport, will make the teams and everyone that is involved in our sport to follow.
Well, Stefano, let's move on to a couple of those listeners' questions. F1 Explains at f1.com is the place, as always, to send those questions. This one is from Mark in Utah. And Mark says, Stefano, do you feel the cost cap is working when only 4 teams are challenging for a podium at the moment every race? If you don't think it's working, how do you think we can fix it, knowing we have another team joining the grid next year with the arrival of Cadillac? So, Stefano, just before you answer that question, I should explain for those who are new to Formula One, the cost cap was introduced by the FIA to limit the amount of money teams can spend each year. And obviously the aim is to allow smaller teams to match the bigger teams. It covers things like developing their engines and cars and paying some staff salaries, but it doesn't include the drivers' salaries. It's around $140 million at the moment. For 2026, it will rise to $215 million. Stefano, to go back to Mark's question, firstly, do you think it is working, and are there any changes you'd like to bring to it in the future?
It is working very, very well. It is working because the fans that are new to this business needs to understand that this sport was under jeopardy of having teams not able to fund themselves. And the financial situation of the team was very weak. And now, due to that, the team has found the stability that will allow them to grow. Therefore, it is an essential part of not only the actual regulation, but also the future regulation. And this is something that all the teams have understood the quality of this job, that, as I said, is trying to reduce the gaps between the bigger team and the smaller team. And to the question of only 4 teams, I mean, 4 teams is already big numbers. In the past, there was maybe 1 team, 2.
It's nearly half the grid.
Absolutely. And by the way, of course, next year going to change the regulation, because the focus will be on a different power unit with the focus on sustainable fuel that is very relevant for the future of a sport. But when the regulation will be stable, the effect on this budget cap will be massive. Therefore, it has been great, and that is one of the key of the success of our sport.
Again, you might have guessed this, Stefano, but I was a huge Formula One fan growing up. I don't like to mention it, but I can remember when there were the teams in the 2000s who simply did not score points. You know, they were in Formula One, and really, it was a good weekend if they got to the end of the Grand Prix. And now we have teams who really, you can come into a race weekend and know that they can score points, and good points. We saw Sauber finish 10th in the championship last year. Look at races like Nico Hülkenberg as well. That's, again, down partly to the cost cap, isn't it? All teams are competitive.
And not only that, I would say we don't have to forget that not many years ago, some teams were sold by a value of £1. You never say £1 is £1. Because they were not really financially solid and ready to go ahead.
Sure.
Now, teams are refusing to offer them 1.5 billion. It's a lot of money, eh?
It's a big gap between that and a pound.
Now it's crazy. So it's something that is all related to the sport is great, but also the fact that the cap is doing a great job.
Speaking of numbers, Adam in New York says, why doesn't Formula One give more points to the drivers like other racing series? So, for example, IndyCar gives 50 points to the winner, and it goes down there. There are some Formula One fans who've said to me, well, shouldn't everybody get a point? Stefano, I'm so bad at maths, and often I have to work out the drivers' championship results after the race is finished. So I'm very glad that doesn't happen, because that would make my maths a lot more complicated. Why doesn't the sport do that?
Why they don't copy us? I mean, I should put the reverse question. I mean,
I'm very happy with how it is. I'll be honest.
Of course, we need to respect every championship. There is a tradition on that. There is a logic behind that, and there is also a fact that if you go to all the cars, there is a question of the validity of what is racing, and therefore there's not even a single answer to that point. But of course, the fact that you need to remember also that behind that there are contacts with the drivers that are related to points that of course will change the dynamic of the relation with the teams. There are so many factors that are evaluated when there is such a change, but in terms of stability, it's relevant to keep that system stable, because now it's very strong, and we do believe that all the maths done when we prepared the Concord Agreement, is the agreement that is basically governing our sport, also in terms of financials, he has to take in consideration these kind of scales of points.
John, and the Concord Agreement is the agreement that the teams sign in order to keep them competing in Formula One. And I guess as well, Stefano, we like to see a World Championship point being prestigious. You know, it's only down to 10th place. I mean, maybe that would be lost.
I totally agree. Can you imagine if we were given 60 points? I'm just guessing for the championship that, like 2 years ago, Max was winning almost every race. We're going to have a classification with thousands of points.
What is the value of that? Championship points.
It was too much.
Yeah, especially for people bad at maths like me. Let's move on to Harold in Maryland. Thank you for your question, Harold. Harold says, with the surge in Formula One's popularity in the USA, what are the relationships between Formula One and the various US racing series like? Really, really good question from Harold.
Well, I think, Harold, it's definitely something that I believe that will take us to another step of attention in US to our sport. That means that all the system, drivers, engineering, mechanics, we represent the pinnacle of motorsport. And therefore, I do believe that this kind of attention to our sport will be very important to raise the quality and the attention to us that will be beneficial to the market where Harold is living.
The secondary question Harold asks is, why do you think there's a lack of American drivers at the moment? So as we speak, there's no American drivers on the grid. Logan Sargent was our most recent. We've also had Alex Rossi and Scott Speed in the not too distant past. Would you like to see more American drivers, Stefano? Why do you think we're in a position at the moment where we haven't quite got one yet?
Well, the answer is definitely I would love to see them, but it's not only the relevancy of the passport, it's the relevancy of the stopwatch in our sport. And if you're not strong enough in terms of being competitive, that could be, as we know, a boomerang and not a positive element. So it is clear that our environment in terms of competition is very tough. And the level of that is stronger, and the quality of our driving skill is different. I'm not disputing about the quality of the drivers over the champions in US, but when they came to Formula 1, unfortunately the experience was not great. That means that hopefully the interest that we are generating more and more in US will allow this new driver to have also experience in Europe or in other categories, or to be even stronger because they see a different way to prepare the racing, and this will allow hopefully soon to have an American driver competing with the right level of quality and competitiveness in F1. That would be terrific.
Let's hope so. Now, our next listener questions are about the Formula One calendar. The 2026 calendar has now been announced, and two big changes. One is that the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola doesn't feature. We've got an additional race in Spain, as well as the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona. We've got a street race in Madrid in September. And Pat in Minnesota has sent us this voice note.
Hello, my question for Stefano. How can F1 balance the wishes of your longtime fans who love pure racing and classic tracks with the new fans who want to party with the race, like Miami? While we understand the money available in street circuits in large cities, we worry about the classic tracks disappearing. Thanks in advance.
Well, I think that Pat is absolutely right, but that's my job. Very synthetic, to keep the balance between the new track and the traditional track. For me, one point is relevant. Traditional track doesn't mean it has to be old, because if it's old, it's not traditional.
Sure.
If you have that heritage, it's something that is more important if you keep investing in the facility, respecting the fans that are going there. Therefore, that's something that we and I know very, very well. I can assure you, Pat, that we will not have 24 street racing circuit, because that will not happen. But we want to push the most traditional places to update the facility to respect the fans that are going there, because that's a must of the Formula 1 of today.
I spoke to an American fan in Miami who I know listens to this podcast, and he said to me that he'd never heard or seen a Formula One before, but saw tickets on sale to Miami for the first season, thought, I'll go along, why not? It's here. And passionately fell in love with the sport and has been to several races since. And that's lovely. That's sort of an advantage of street circuits. But then also, to use the American example, to me, Austin feels like a pretty old school track. It's not old, it's fairly new, but it's a very traditional feeling track. Simon in Belgium had a very similar question to that one, so thank you to you, Simon. And while we're talking about the F1 calendar, Stefano, this is the second consecutive season with 24 races, so that's the most we've ever had in a Formula One season. Do you think that's the ideal number? Could you see it increasing? Where are we with the number of races?
I think that the number that we have today, 24, is the right one. As always in life, is a matter of demand and offer. And I believe that we are pretty balanced in terms of the evolution that we had If you think just a couple of years ago, we were 20 and we did a big jump. But this is what the market wants. This is what the fans want, what the country wants. And I believe that now we are in a good place. I can and we can organize more than 24 for sure, but we will not do it.
Sure.
And we want to stabilize with this number, finding the right flows in terms of where we're going to maximize our attention to the sustainability aspect of it, and making sure there is the right rhythm, because today the relevancy of our sport is also connected to the content we're producing. And if you look at the other sport, I mean, for all American fans, they're used to have 80 games in NBA, 160 games in baseball, you know, and in football, soccer, you know, we have a lot of tournament, the league, the Champion League and other things. So we are, if you just talk about sport, we have to compare ourselves with the content that every day the other sport can deploy. So on that, the relevance of being important in all the in all the places that we are is very, very relevant for our future. Therefore, I think that is the right number, and I think that everyone is accepting the fact that with this we can go all around the world, having great events. Thanks God, sold out everywhere we go, and is attracting more and more fans. So we stay with that.
Lindsay in Philadelphia says, my question for Stefano is what efforts are underway to make Formula One more accessible and affordable for people from all socio-economic backgrounds?
Well, I think that it's a very relevant, good question. I think that today the attention that we are having together with our promoter is to make sure that there are different packages, different offers for all our fans. Of course, as a sport, we have a range of tickets for GA or for certain grandstand of area where, of course, there are different level of services. It's just a matter of providing everywhere we go the different opportunity, because we need to be respectful. And I always said to all of us, and the people working for one, that without people that are coming here, investing their money, staying under 40 degrees centigrades or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or under the rain, pouring rain, in the mud, in a very difficult situation, well, we need to respect them. That's why we want to make sure that the drivers are accessible. We want to make sure that the team principal and the people who represent our sport give to our fans the most accessibility that they can, because they deserve that.
Liv is in the UK, and Liv's asked a great question. Liv says, hi, F1 Explains. I love the podcast so much. Well, Liv, thank you. And also thank you for putting that in while we've got the boss. We really appreciate that. Liv says, my question for Stefano is, how did your love for Formula One and motorsport come to you? It's a really nice question from Liv.
Well, Liv, as I said before, I was born in Imola, and I was not far away from the track. And my school were just behind the track. So when you're born in that city and you were feeling, you know, the adrenaline of all the racing, 4 wheels, 2 wheels, 3 wheels at that time with the Sadega 2, I mean, you cannot not be in love with that sport. And then, of course, it was just, you know, my life to take me in that world. When I was in high school, I was going to the track of Imola, helping like a lot of kids doing just because they love that, because it's the first time that you can see your hero. It was great because I was meeting people that for me were iconic for F1 and also from the motorbike point of view, that now I took the place off, and has been fascinating. And then, of course, after university, I just sent my CV around and Ferrari took me. So, and then I started my journey in this incredible blessed years where motorsport is really part of my life.
Now, Stefano, Formula One, the movie, is out. It's very exciting. What do you hope that film will do for the sport?
I hope that that movie will, let's say, attract people who doesn't know exactly who we are, in order for all of us to have the duty to capture them and to keep in our net. And I would say the best comment that I would love to see is that, wow, I want to understand more about this sport. I want to understand what is real about the movie. That is a very authentic movie, by the way. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank, Jerry Bruckheimer, Joe Kosinski, Apple, and all the people working in this movie, because I think they will represent for us another milestone of the growth of awareness of our sport around the world.
And did that young man who you just described growing up, watching motorsport in Imola, or the person who joined the Ferrari in the 1990s as a nervous new employee, ever think he'd have a cameo in a Hollywood film? Is that something you ever expected on your CV, Stefano?
No, that is absolutely not. And don't make me red. Because honestly,
I thought you were
not,
excellent.
I don't know. You're too sweet. But, thanks God to that. The scene was just, I think, 2 seconds, so that's perfect.
It was great. There's like Stefano. I got very excited in the cinema. It was fantastic. And I don't think that's too much of a spoiler for those who haven't watched it. Keep your eyes peeled for Stefano. Looking ahead, Stefano, what's the next big thing for Formula One? Could we be looking at going somewhere new to race? Is there something you particularly want to change? Like you've mentioned a lot in our chats, the growth of this wonderful sport. What's the next big exciting thing, do you think?
Well, the next is for sure stabilizing the growth. Because just look back, I'm not talking about 40 years, just 4 years ago, the sport was a different dimension. Therefore, we need to be strong to keep that growth in the right way. Then, of course, I would love to have a race in Africa, because the only continent we are missing. I would love to be connected to more and more younger generation fans who, in this world where there's so many things that you want to do, would like to make to you, Christian, more and more question. Because if we are going to be in this situation, that means that we have done all together a great job.
Well, I mean, that's what this podcast is all about. F1 Explained at F1.com. Our listeners send us our questions. We hopefully answer them. We ask them to experts. And one of those topics we talk about an awful lot on this podcast this year, and we will carry on for the end of this season and into next year, is 2026. New rules, a bit of a sort of refresh in many ways for the sport. Stefano, why is it so exciting? What's changing? What are you most looking forward to?
Well, when you are in a season like this year, when the competition is great, the gaps are milliseconds, the vast majority of people they're asking why you have to change. And the answer is pretty obvious. We need to always think ahead. And the focus on the regulation that will be applied next year is on one element that we consider non-negotiable, is the attention to sustainability through the introduction of sustainable fuel. That is allowing, manufacturers to stay focused in motorsport, because they understand that now that's a possible opportunity for enlarging the portfolio of offer in the mobility space, because we will offer a platform that will allow the sustainable fuel to be cheaper in the shorter term. And that will change completely the paradigm of the mobility field through motorsport and mainly through Formula One. And then, of course, is our goal is to make sure that the race is attractive, and the regulation should allow and will allow the gaps to be closed in a shorter time if one team is working better than another team. So that's the beauty of what is happening next year. And on top of that, we're going to have new manufacturers, as I said to you, Audi, we're going to have Cadillac, we're going to have Honda. So it's big names which are coming back because of this regulation. So always thinking ahead and never be afraid of the change that we believe need to manage, of course, and the due time with the right skills, in order to make sure that this sport is keeping the leadership in terms of innovation, in terms of, as I said, looking after the corner, because that's the way we are being able to stay ahead of everyone in the context of our sport.
Absolutely. And Ford joining with Red Bull and going to Madrid, it's all really exciting. We should explain for new listeners as well that this is not new to Formula One. Formula One has refreshed its rules periodically for a number of years. So this isn't new that F1's changing its rules, is it? Formula One, even in your time at Ferrari, you must have been looking ahead to new rule changes and new rule sets which could mix up the order a little bit.
Absolutely. That's the nature of Formula One. It's the pinnacle of motorsport in all relevant element. Technology has been part of our sport. In the past, we were the leaders on the carbon fiber materials, in simulations, in analysis, in CFD calculation, wind tunnel application, materials, And all this technology has been applied in other sector of industry. That's really something that will stay fascinating all the engineers that are working in Formula 1.
One final question, Stefano, and if you don't mind, it's from me, not from a listener, so apologies, listeners, but you are obviously someone with great motorsport experience. You've worked for some of these huge manufacturers, but that's not always been the case. You know, there was a time when you were a motorsport fan like the rest of us. Do you ever stop and think, I'm the boss of Formula 1? That's cool, or that's scary, or that's mad. Like how you've ended up here as the boss of, you know, the biggest motor racing series in the world. Do you ever sit and reflect on that?
Don't have the time to think about it, to be honest. And it's better not, because I try to be the same guy that I was when I was not like that, because there are certain values that are shaping my personality will not change. And as always in life, you don't have to wear a mask, because the mask is sliding out of your face one day or the other. So I'm blessed to do that. I love to do that. But believe me, I feel the responsibility of being in this role. And up to the moment where I will be in this seat, I will do that 100%. And this is my life, and on which, if I may say, I need to thank also my family to understand that, because it's not something that you give it for granted. So I'm very blessed, as I said before.
I consider myself really lucky to be a tiny part of this sport and see the hard work that Formula One, you and your team, the hard work that goes into keeping this sport successful, making it grow. I love this sport. I speak to our listeners a lot. I know they love this sport. So really did want to say, Stefano, on behalf of us Formula One fans, thank you for the work you and your team do. It's so great to see Formula One in such a great place at the moment, growing, thriving in the middle of a great championship battle. And I know how many people work so hard to do that. So, Stefano, thank you for that. And thank you for your time in coming on F1 Explains. This has been a joy to talk to you.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks for you. Thanks to all our fans. As I said, without them, we couldn't be here. We would have been involved in other things. So that's our duty. That's our pleasure. And so stay tuned. And Christian, to the next one.
To the next one.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm so grateful to spend so much time with Stefano, to get to know him and to put your questions to him. So thank you very much to Stefano and his team, because as we said earlier, he's a very busy man on a race weekend. I just found it fascinating to know what it's like running this whole sport, this whole operation. Absolutely insane job, and he does it wonderfully well. So thank you very much, Stefano, for coming on F1 Explains. And as I mentioned earlier, F1 Explains at f1.com is the place to send us your questions on absolutely anything you like. And do search F1 Explains wherever you get your podcasts, because we've had all sorts of episodes over the past couple of years, from Ask a Formula One driver with the likes of Lando Norris, Ask a Team Principal episodes, James Vowles, the Williams TP has been on very recently, and we do quick fire specials as well, where we throw all sorts of random topics at Formula One experts. F1 Explains at f1.com is our email address, and just search F1 Explains wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'm going to go before I get run over by some tyres. We'll be back soon on F1 Explains. Bye for now.